We often celebrate leaders at their peak, when they are composed, decisive, and admired. But what we don't talk about enough is what had to break before the leader could truly emerge. In my work in neuroleadership, I've seen this again and again. Growth rarely comes from strength alone. It comes from rupture. From the moment when holding it all together becomes more costly than letting something fall apart. Today's conversation is about that moment. Joining me is Pranay Lodhiya, Chief Financial and Corporate Services Officer of the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. A leader whose journey reminds us that rewiring doesn't begin with answers. It begins with honesty. Pranay, welcome to the Rewired Leader.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Let's start here. What had to break in your leadership before something more authentic could emerge? And when you think back to that moment, was it sudden or had it been quietly building for a long time?
I've been thinking about this question and reflecting back on my leadership journey, which started at a very young point in my career. I think one of the things that really had to break was this sort of corporate ego and really letting go of the need to know everything, letting go of the need to be focused on where my next step was and how I can navigate that, and just letting go of some of those aspects changed the way I approached not only leadership but work.
That's interesting. And when you think back to that moment, was it a sudden shift or was it been quietly building for some time?
No, I think there was it was quietly building for some time with a number of factors. I think I always had a very values-based approach to work and my leadership as well. But I was always sometimes in an environment where that was supported and sometimes in the environment where it didn't align. And what I found when things didn't align, it left a bit of tension within me where the values didn't align, because to some extent I expected everybody to behave or act with the same values that I came into work with. And gradually when I found that was happening, I almost had this need to prove myself over and over again, because somehow I felt that it didn't match up to what was expected, whereas what it was really didn't align with my values. So over time it actually sort of grew more and more. When it broke, when it finally I saw, and I stopped needing to validate myself in other people's eyes, I think that's when it really, I accepted myself and my leadership and my flaws as a leader, my strengths as a leader better. I stopped trying to be something that I wasn't. And I was also accepting of the journey that was presented to me, rather than trying to become somebody that I wasn't, or going on a path that I wasn't necessarily always comfortable with.
When it broke, we understood what you did, but before it broke, what was the story that you were telling yourself?
I think before it broke, the story that I was telling myself that for some reason that I gave too much credence to other people's views on me, who necessarily, because I felt that they knew better, so something must be lacking in me, or I was frustrated with some of the what I regarded at that point as being unfairness, which was not necessarily a correct way of looking at it. All it is that different leaders and different may not always share your same values, and they look at things in a different light to you do. Things that are important to them either may not necessarily be things that are important to you, and that was important for me to grasp, and also learn from other leaders what to sort of adopt and what to not adopt.
There's often a shift that happens after a breaking point. Not always externally, but internally first. So when that moment happened for you, what changed first in how you made decisions, how you related to people? And you can say, how do you relate it to yourself? And you're comfortable sharing what surprised you most about the change.
That's a very good question. And I think it comes back to how you relate to yourself and how you relate to people. Let me answer that bit first. Yep. In terms of how I related to myself, I stopped seeing myself through other people's eyes, or needing to see myself through other people's eyes. And what that made me understand is what are the types of people I want to work with? What is the type of leader I want to become? And it also made me more confident of my own decision making, in the sense that I was not trying to second guess myself based on what other people would think of my decision, but I relied more confidently on my instincts as a leader, and I also saw myself in a different light. And what I mean by a different light, I saw myself in a more positive light rather than I won't say I used to see myself in a negative light, but I would see myself in a secondary light, or not being confident of some of the decisions I used to be making.
And that's interesting.
The other thing is how I related to others. So as a leader, especially when I was young and in my early stages of my leadership career, one of the things that I always wanted was to be liked by others. And that was something that I thought was important for me to progress. Once I actually broke that nexus, I learned that it wasn't about liking others. It was more about being respected by others. And it didn't matter to me whether people thought that I was a good leader or not. Prior to that, it was always mattered that I wanted to be known as a good leader. And I still do to a certain point, but I'm not as hung up on that as I probably used to be. I'm a lot more relaxed about it. I'm focused on the now more than probably looking at, okay, where is this taking me and things like that.
Okay, that's interesting. But I would like to ask this. I'm not sure if you're comfortable sharing, but what surprised you the most about that change?
I think letting go. So what I mean by letting go is letting go of that internal tension, and that probably, I think all leaders are insecure. If any leader says that they're not insecure, there's a level of narcissism in that, and that I think is not a good leader. So you have to have some level of insecurity about you. But one of the things that came through for me was around the fact that I was not as insecure as I probably was before. And I think I went back to my core self. I think I handled things. I'd like to think that I was a lot more humble and acted with more humility than I may have done in the past, because you let go of some of that ego that you probably have as you are as a leader, that you've got to be right and all those things that go on within you. So I think that bit within me was a big factor, that letting go.
Okay. This is something many leaders don't name out loud. And looking back, what was the hidden cost of holding everything together before it broke? Not just professionally, personally too. What did it cost your energy, your relationships, your sense of self?
I think the hidden cost in all of these things is inner peace, your self-worth, and letting go of probably, anxiety. And sometimes in leadership, we tend to make decisions coming from a place of anxiety, or we make decisions that are sort of because we feel like we need to make that decision and we have to make the right decision all the time. And one of the things that I figured out, that there's no right or wrong way. It's about just moving forward and progressing forward. One of the aspects of the cost of trying to hold everything together is your own emotional sanity. And I think that's very important. And I think once you go past that, then your emotional sanity becomes a lot different to what it was when prior to that change happening.
What do you think your nervous system was carrying at that time?
It's carrying a lot of stress, carrying a lot of anxiety, probably. Generally, I don't think that I'm easily stressed, but comparatively to now, I think at that time I was carrying a lot of nervous energy, anxiety, worrying about the tension that comes from sort of worrying about other people's behaviors and how that might impact upon you in that work situation, or worrying about what so-and-so must be thinking, or worrying about why somebody is doing or playing this game. I think, and that carries a lot of, and that affects the way you present yourself at work. That also affects the way you present yourself. Compared to then, I think it's a lot different now.
How do you lead differently today because of those experiences, especially under pressure, when things were uncertain or stakes were even high? What do you do now actually that simply you couldn't do before?
One of the biggest change that I felt in myself, say compared to earlier in my leadership career to where I am now, and some of that might be just growth and age and all that, but I don't necessarily define my worth and myself and my leadership style through work only. So I don't define myself through work anymore, which was a big part, especially in a leadership style. That was a big part of what I was before, and that I think has helped me quite a bit when I stopped defining me as a person through my work. I think I'm more trusting of myself. I think I'm more at peace with myself that in those type of situations. The other thing is, I think one of the things that I didn't mention in that part of letting go is I let go of chasing something. As a leader, I think we're always chasing for something, or the next step in the leadership, or the next big thing. And I think one of the things that I was comfortable where I am, and that actually made me a better leader in doing what I was doing personally. So I think to a certain extent, that bit was a big factor, that I became a lot more assured, a lot more not wondering what the implications of this decision. I've always been a change, and I've always been involved in driving change and transformation, and sometimes that's what has led me to, because any change is polarizing. So when you drive change, you will polarize people, and I think that aspect affected me because of the way people viewed me, but now not so much. I'm much more, I've just driven a major change program. One of the things that I was reflecting on is my process within me during that change versus other changes that I've driven, and I was a lot more relaxed and I made better decisions during that time. I think others may not agree with me. I was comfortable, I would say, with people not being happy with what I was driving at times, whereas in previous times it would affect me. I wanted people to be okay with what I was driving, but not always people will be okay.
Great.
If that makes sense, yeah.
Definitely. But talking about change and transformation, you just mentioned that you have, coming from that environment, and now that you've recently done a few change management processes in your current portfolio, what is the key word that you would say has changed between what it was and how you used to handle change management before, and what it is now? One key word that you would say.
I think there is a much more at ease with having the courage to disrupt, because that's what we did, but also having the I think humility in the way that it's not, whilst you may be the person who outlines the vision or or being the architect, that in its own is not enough. You need the support, people around you, to make that happen. So I'm mindful and grateful. I think I've always been somebody who's acknowledged, I hope I have, acknowledged good performance, and also acknowledged where people have done amazingly well. That's been something that I've been showing gratitude, I think, is something that I've always adopted, even from a very starting point. Doing that there's a slight change in the sense, slight but important, doing that, but also in a sense of really embracing the fact that you are only one part of the process, and everyone around you has actually shaped and helped that change happen. That realization is a different realization to what would have happened, say, 20 years ago.
I would like to hear your view about disruption. How are you embracing disruption in this whole rewiring moment? Are you looking at it in a negative point of view? Are you looking at it a positive point of view? Or is it a hybrid role it plays?
The courage to disrupt has a number of elements to it. One is identifying that there is something that needs to be disrupted to change a pattern of behavior or pattern of processes that is not working necessarily to the outcome. But it's also about acknowledging that. So sometimes when people say, well, we have to disrupt this, they come from a mindset that is saying that whatever was in place was wrong. So I think the first step you need to do in that is to acknowledge that it wasn't wrong. That was set up, that behavior or that process or whatever it was, that culture was established in a point in time with a type of people that was needed for the organization at that time. So I think that is something in any change you have to acknowledge. And acknowledging that really changes the way your mind looks at how you actually drive the next phase. Because that acknowledgement is important in building the narrative for the future change or the future disruption you're going to cause. So understanding and acknowledging that is a big part of it. I think the other aspect of disruption is, so you identify the elements that need to be changed, you articulate what is your end point, and share that. Now, that may not be the perfect model, and through the change program, you might actually set it up at, say, 100, and you have to pare it back to 80. But that 80 is still a major disruption, and it takes into account input from various factors as well. And being able to take those things into consideration is important, rather than being dogmatic about what you have to do. In terms of how I process that internally, I think one of the things is that whilst it's a very internal thing, you can't internalize it. And you talk about rewiring your brain. It's about rewiring your inner workings of your brain to be able to let go of things that you may not be able to let go of, say, when you were in a different mindset. Now that is a very important part, because sometimes what happens is when you're actually in a certain mindset, you don't listen or you don't hear what good ideas are coming through, because you're so focused on the end product. So it becomes more about the journey than the end product. And once you rewire your thinking to say, okay, well, that is where I need to get to, and then you change your mindset to accept feedback and change things regarding that, then I think you get a better outcome.
So there's someone listening right now who is holding on to sheer will. They're successful on the outside, but internally something feels unsustainable. So if you were speaking directly to that leader, someone in the about to break phase, what would you want them to hear?
Two things. We live in a corporate world or environment where success is usually measured by your progress to the C-suite or things like that, and where the definition of what a C-suiter is sort of defined by the corporate culture that has been established from the 70s and 80s. And sometimes that can be very A-type personalities and things like that. And a lot of people struggle internally to fit that mold, right? And I think that the sooner you let go of that and go back to your authentic self and accept the fact that where you're and accept your strengths and accept your shortcomings, I think that really becomes the start of your authentic journey. And then you will attract people or organizations around you that fit that, rather than placing yourself in organizations that do not necessarily feed your soul, for that matter, or people around you that don't feed your soul. So I think that is a very important, and embracing yourself.
Absolutely.
For a while, things that came very naturally to me in work and personal life, or outside of work in terms of creative pursuits, things that came naturally to me, I didn't give it any credence, because I was brought up in an environment where things had to be hard for them to be valuable. That meant that even as a leader, things that came naturally to me, I didn't actually necessarily value as much. And once that sort of changed within me, I think I started to be more comfortable with not necessarily being a leader as defined by the books. And I think this is where some of the leadership books, I'm not a big fan of a lot of leadership books sometimes, because they do not take into account different circumstances, social upbringing. They don't take into account different environments that you're actually working with, and different dynamics that you're working with. They become very two-dimensional in their approach. So that's where things like what you working through, and things like looking at different personality and styles of those come in very handy in dealing with people, because there's no two-dimensional way of looking at it.
Absolutely, and I totally agree with you on that. But what I'm hearing in your story, Pranay, is something I see again and again. That leadership doesn't work through force. It rewires through awareness. Breakdowns are not considered failure. They often mean you're rewiring the truth of who you're becoming. So thank you for being honest in this whole conversation. They were not failures that you had.
No.
Yeah, definitely not. And they often mean that the old wiring can no longer, I would say, hold the truth. The old wiring no longer holds what it is now, because things have changed, environment has changed, of who you are, but about who you're becoming. So can you tell me in few words, how do you feel about the rewired leader?
Look, if you're rewired, it means you're breaking away from the norms and the conventions and the need to seek validation and all of that, and go back to your authentic self. And it also means that you stop chasing things for the sake of chasing things. I think if you're already a leader, if that makes you a more authentic person, then that will also play out in your leadership style. And I think what that then does is that you are more at, I suppose, peace within yourself, and where you are in your journey, rather than constantly in pursuit of something. And then your interactions with people change. The way you actually support people around you change. I've always been a big believer in the fact that as leaders, we have a huge responsibility of building new leaders. So I actually, wherever I can, I don't believe that I have any sort of, all I can do is share experiences. I don't have any gems that I can sort of probably put out, but what I can do is share my experiences. And if I can, through my insight and experiences, help other leaders come through, then that's a huge plus.
I think that's an absolute value that every leader should actually adopt. And talking about value add that a leader should do, it's not just about KPIs and meeting. I think it's beyond that. It's about the human touch of leading someone, or even sharing your personal life. So we have come to the end of our episode, and thank you so much, Pranay, for bringing so much honesty to this conversation.
Oh, pleasure.
And do you have anything else to say about the Rewired Leader podcast?
I think when you asked me to do this podcast and the research I did on the books that you've written as well, it got me thinking about my own journey and what were the points of change in my own growth as a leader. And what you talk about in terms of rewiring yourself to become a more authentic version of yourself, I think that applies not only in terms of leadership, but to your personal life as well, and just the way you go about day-to-day things. So
totally agree, and thank you so much, Pranay.
No, thank you.
To everyone listening, if something in you feels like it's cracking, pause before you patch it up. That may not be the end. It may be the beginning of your rewiring. This is the Rewired Leader, where nervous systems meet boardroom, where pressure becomes insight and presence becomes power. Each week, we go beyond performance and into the patterns that shape how we lead, we decide and relate and rise. We explore the science behind transformation, the psychology beneath success, and the human stories that redefine what authentic leadership truly means. Because leadership isn't about holding it together. It's about rewiring what no longer serves you so you can lead with clarity, courage, and power. I'm Dr. Watceilia Varso, and this is the Rewired Leader podcast. Until next time, rewire what limits you, regenerate what sustains you, and rise deliberately.